I'm Pratista Strong. I'm an osteopathic physician, and I have a concierge medical practice here in Kirkwood, Missouri, going on our 5th year this year. So I practice personalized, very private medical care that is both east and west. So it's kind of a spectrum of the east of where I'm from. I'm from Nepal, Kathmandu, Nepal. Hence my practice is called Kathmandu Clinic. And the west. So we need the Western medicine, but we need the east as well. So that's kind of this talk, mixing those two things together, and the food is actually a mix of that as well. I want to thank Otto and Shelley Etzel for hosting this here, and I want to thank Red School Candle Company for recording this event, so that everyone can have that. And thanks to my family as well for being here. I kicked them out because they're going to distract me. So, so this is the anti-inflammatory lifestyle, and I've presented this a few different places. Actually presented at the local Fresh Time in Kirkwood before pandemic, right? There's like the BP and the AP type of lifestyle nowadays, right? Before pandemic and after pandemic. And presented it at, what else? The Arthritis Foundation and Golden Grocers, which is, I think, now closed, and St. Louis Acupuncture. I think that's in Webster. I forget what their full title name is. But a lot of good questions come from it because, doctor means teacher in Latin, and that's what I am. I educate patients one at a time, and this way I can educate a lot of people en masse. So I have no financial disclosures, and medicine should be individualized to your needs. Please talk to your doctor and about any specific health conditions that might arise for this particular talk. So inflammation, what is inflammation, right? So a lot of disease conditions that have inflammation in them. And, in the Western model, it's like you have this hypertension, and you take a med and you just go on your day. It's actually inflammation. Arthritis, asthma, COPD, the list goes on and on. All these things can be augmented, reduced, a medication can be dropped, and you can have such profound benefits from an anti-inflammatory lifestyle. And moving on from that, food, right? So disease and food don't really connect for us in the Western model. And, you eat the meds, and then you eat your food, and they don't really connect for a lot of us. And so that's the whole kind of point of this, is that food is medicine. And so when we go from those inflammatory disease conditions and we go to asking about this, are you eating sad food? So what is sad food? It's the standard American diet. So the standard American diet is very poor, very, very poor. It's high in processed carbs, heavy intake of that. So loads of processed carbs and processed red meats and added sugars and very limited greens and fruits and whole grains. So it's a recipe for disaster, and it's no wonder we have so many chronic conditions in the West, and it's not just the United States, but just in the Western world. As the world gets more developed, we have more of that. So we could stop all this. We could stop all the inflammation with meds. Yeah, we know about NSAIDs, right? Anti-inflammatory, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, ibuprofen, diclofenac, naproxone. Then we can go to some of the more big guns as well, like Mobic. And then there's statins to stop for cholesterol, right? Atorvastatin or rosuvastatin. And then there's like big gun heavies like biologics. And then all of these things we can kind of, if we have a diagnosis, we can get a medication for. But we don't ever really get to the root of what's going on. And so we just put a Band-Aid over it, and we just say, okay, yeah, keep doing what you're doing and try to live an active life and eat healthy. What does that really mean, right? So in order to understand the anti-inflammatory lifestyle, it's good to understand what inflammation means itself. And the foods that influence inflammation. So we can connect the dots of disease condition that is now you can think of it as an inflammatory condition and foods that help as an anti-inflammatory. This is kind of complicated, and in the chart, and I'm pretty sure in that thing it's like really, really hard to read. But so 2 things I kind of want you to look at. There is a pathway that goes down the omega-6 ladder, and there's a pathway, the red, and the pathway that goes down the omega-3 ladder. And this is the arachidonic acid pathway. And with the arachidonic acid pathway, we can modulate this by what we eat, okay? So linoloic acids can go into these other amino acids, fatty acids that go into the arachidonic acid pathway to thromboxane A2 and B2. And then essentially these become a pro-inflammatory condition. So basically kind of an enzyme takes it's a factory, right? Enzyme you kind of think of as every cell has like a little factory in how it modulates what you take in. And what you take in, it just shuttles it into a pathway. So this omega-6 pathway is a pro-inflammatory. So if you eat a lot of these, and we'll look at that, it becomes just more pro-inflammatory. And I have another chart after this that will show a little bit more. The omega-3 pathway is alpha-linoloic. So it's just one name change for you all. It's just kind of a few different molecular structural changes. And the alpha-linoloic with the same enzymes can end up making a whole different other product. And everyone's kind of heard of EPA and DHA, right? That's in like fish oils and stuff like that for supplements. So it goes down this other pathway, the yellow to green pathway, and that makes anti-inflammatory byproducts. And those are just kind of a balance. So it's not that we don't want any of this omega-6 and we want a ton of the 3 or vice versa. It's a balance, the ratio, and that's really what nature is all about. It's about balancing. The next one I'll show you. Oh, one more thing. So turmeric, food-wise, turmeric, and we'll eat a lot of turmeric and learn a lot about turmeric today. Make sure if anybody has anything white, make sure don't get it stained yellow. Turmeric actually blocks this pathway, and the next slide actually shows different drugs. It's kind of hard to read. I don't know if you can kind of see it, but corticosteroids, so prednisone blocks that pathway, that red pathway we were looking at in the slide before. NSAIDs block, and aspirins block this, or Tylenol as well, block the COX-2s. There's, what else do I have on here? There's other medications. Montelukast is another one that blocks the leukotrienes. And there's other things up here that kind of show TNF-alpha blockers, and those are kind of pro-inflammatory cytokines, and these are all kind of medications like Remicade and Enbrel and things like that, those injectables that block those. So we've got a lot of progress, with Western medicine, all these great meds, but we never actually really get to the end of it. So we've got one thing, turmeric, right, that can block just as equivalent to an anti-inflammatory NSAID like ibuprofen, and believe it or not, a big gun like Remicade, nutmeg can actually block TNF-alpha, okay? And just something so lowly as that. There's been studies about nutmeg that can block TNF-alpha. And I put that nutmeg right there. Perfect. So again, another way to look at inflammation is in our blood. So CRP or C-reactive protein or HS high sensitivity CRP are markers that can be drawn in a blood test easily, and that's a way to look at how much inflammation there is. And actually, it's actually like a protein that is shown in your body. And berries, so just eating rich antioxidant organic berries can reduce CRP levels. And these are studies. These are actual studies. I'm not just like saying berries are great. And by the way, I just wanted to note all citations are actually written in the very, very bottom. So you can even, once you get the lecture, you can even go and further read if you want to. Another example of sugar, right? We eat a lot of sugar, Twix bar, that's the only thing that comes in my head right now. And it goes and spikes your glucose, and then what happens is you end up producing insulin from your pancreas, and those high insulin and high glucose levels achieved by a SAD diet, right, the standard American diet, can increase that CRP level. And so, again, this is a marker of inflammation before somebody's even a diabetic. They end up having these things. So when you know, it really irritates me whenever when I talk with somebody and they say, oh, my doctor so-and-so told me that I'm pre-diabetic. They just told me to watch what I eat. What does that mean? What do we do with that? There's essentially like a smoldering diabetes that you don't even know about that can be checked with levels, and that's again because of the standard American diet, a high carb, processed meat, low veg, low fruit. So another part of what is inflammation, kind of how food modulates, is that actually genetic expression can relate to inflammation and get modulated just by eating omega-3s. So here's some anchovies sitting in a can. And this study actually shows that there's a clear example of just eating omega-3s, and we'll talk about what that is, because everyone's kind of like, what the heck is that? It's okay, we'll go through it. They're an example of what's called nutrigenomics, how nutrients actually affect your genes. Because we're always told, like, oh, it's our genetics, we can't do anything about it. That's wrong. That's kind of like from the 90s and 2000s, we got the genome sequenced and everything, but we had no idea what to do with that data. But now we know that there's actual things we can modulate just by food in your genetics now that you can change. And then there's the GI, and we'll talk about that as well. So GI dysbiosis, where the gut is basically not healthy, and with the gut microbiome and the bacteria that's in your gut, there's been evidence to show that the disruption of the gut and the microbiome can trigger an inflammatory disease. So just your gut not being right can cause inflammatory conditions. So those are kind of some examples and kind of like an intro to inflammation and disease and how they're correlated. And, you know, bear with me because we'll go through what we can do, okay? But before we go through this list, because it's kind of like a list, and I'll give everybody an outline as well. There's a PowerPoint, but there's also an outline that I usually give patients to go read. The preface of it is it's not a diet. It is not a diet. It's a lifestyle, and the quote, believe it or not, is from the CDC. It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. One of the few things lately that I agree with the CDC on, but I don't want to digress. So this is something that you can take, it's a pattern of how you eat, and you can take until you're 80 and 90 and 100. It's not something that you just do as a temporary fix and then you go back to eating your usual. It's something that you take in the long haul, right? And it's based on the Mediterranean diet archetype and a pattern of eating, not recipes. And food as medicine is really, really powerful, okay? A lot of diet trends out there. Keto, I had to look some of these up. We've heard of keto. Keto is like the repackaged, the hot version of Atkins, right? And then there's paleo, and then they did the raw food thing. You can't cook anything, there's no oil. And then there's vegetarian, which is pretty old school, and then there's vegan, the other end. Now, I didn't know this pegan, which is a paleo vegan, which that's new for me. And there's even a Tom Brady 12. I just looked up like fad diets of 2023. There's a Tom Brady 12. So I think that's just like the Tom Brady Atkins keto version of everything else. So my point is that there's a lot of trends out there, and people get really confused. They're always asking me like, well, what am I supposed to eat? Like, what's good? What's bad? What's this? What's that? So we'll kind of go through them. And this is the most important thing I harp on with everybody. Be a qualitarian. That's what I try to strive to be, a qualitarian. I didn't make this word up. I found it from another dietitian, from a blog that I read. I don't really remember who she is. But if your great-great-grandmother couldn't pronounce it on the back of a package, if you flip the food around and look, and they didn't know what it was, then don't eat it. Right? If the package says all these, and it's usually not the top of the package, it's like the trailing bits of the end of this giant ingredient list that you go and read. You know, 3-diglycerol, such and such. It's not food. It's not real food. It's packaged. It's processed. It's not food. So be a qualitarian. To me, that if you can take that, if you can't take anything else from this, and if you just take that part and you flip your food ingredients and actually read them, that can kind of get you a lot of places. So we're going to do what's called a rundown. We're going to go through 1 through 10, and I've got a bonus 11, and I put some super duper bonus round topics at the end while we kind of make it informal. So, number 1, fats. So everyone repeat this. Fat is good. Fat is good. Fat is really, really good for you. We've had this fat phobia in the U.S. We hate fat. Fat is bad. Fat makes you fat. No, fat is good. Every cell in your body is lined with fat, a lipid bilayer. Fat is good. It's just the type of fat that has been misconstrued and monsterfied to where people are so confused. They're like, well, I just fat. No, absolutely wrong. So fat is good. Always think of that when you're going through your ingredients list. Fat is good. So there's two fatty acids that are absolutely essential to life. You can't live without them. And these sound familiar, right? We talked about inflammation and omega-3s and omega-6s. So let's just go through and note that the omega-6s in a Western diet are 15 to 20 times more. So if we go through this again, this is it's the same little chart thing that I was going through earlier about inflammation. It's the same thing. And now we're focusing on the food portion of it, the omega-3s and the omega-6s. So if you eat your usual, usual standard American diet, you're at like 15 or 20 to 1, meaning, what does that mean? That's a ratio of more omega-6s than omega-3s that you eat. So we basically need to do like a flip-flop, a trade over of the fat. And there's, I don't know if I have that here, but I think I have it written down. There's there's like a list of different omega-6 fatty acids. I have it in the later end, like canola oil or soybean oil or corn oil or those things that we cook with. Those are examples of linoleic acids. And then go into this pro-inflammatory model, right, that we talked about earlier. I know it's flip-flopped. I had them the other way around, but I'm just trying to put you on your toes, make sure you pay attention. The omega-6s we'll talk about. Let's talk about that, because that's kind of what we want to bolster up, because we get omega-3s, I'm sorry. The omega-6s we get all the time, so we want our ratios to be 4 to 1, or even 1 to 1 sometimes, if you can. So,
I'm so sorry. Four omega-3s to 1 omega-6? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the ratio, that's a really good, The question was, so what's the ratio mean? It's 4 of the omega-3s to 1 of the omega-6. Or on the converse, you don't want to be a 15 of the omega-6s to the, I see what your question is. Yeah, I should have done it consistently. 15 to the 1. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good, I taught before, so it's like whenever somebody asks, like, I'll correct it for the next time. So how can we get the omega-3s, more of the omega-3s? We stick to things like olive oil, which are rich in polyphenols. And what do polyphenols do? They actually decrease your blood pressure. There was a trial and a study that had 2 to 4 patients that had 2 to 4 tablespoons of olive oil that they would take, and it reduced their lipid profile. They're reducing their LDL and increasing their HDL, their good cholesterol, and actually improved their vessel, endothelial lining, the actual blood vessel, in that study. And there's, so does that mean that you only cook with olive oil? No, there's other good oils out there. Like, for example, coconut oil is a saturated fat. It's not an omega-3, but it's just as healthy, right? There's been studies out there that virgin coconut oil has polyphenols. So places like, South India or tropical places like Thailand that have high amounts of coconut, they're still just as healthy. So, kind of wanted to kind of run that as well. Smash fish. Try to smash fish twice a week. So what does smash stand for? Salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. And people always ask, well, what is it? What am I supposed to eat? So always find as much of the wild caught as possible, because the salmon that you buy that's nice and pretty pink, and if it's raised in the farm, it is dyed. So it's dyed. I see eyebrows. So it is grain fed, and they're given zeaxanthin, and it's dyed, and so it looks nice and pretty pink. So that it's all a lie. It's not. So you should get wild caught. Okay. Mackerel, usually super cheap. I think this was like $2 or something like that, this can, a wild caught. Anchovies. I like this brand, King Oscar brand. Again, it's like $1. I mean, it lasts for like 2 or 3 years. You can put it in your pantry, and if it expires, you put it in the ground and you grow a plant on it. It actually is great fertilizer, so you actually you don't even have to waste it. Sardines. This particular brand is they're all wild caught. That's the thing. If you get them wild, they eat what they need to eat, and then you benefit by eating the algae. And this is a particular brand I think I've seen at both Fresh Thyme and Whole Foods that is a good pickled herring, and they have that available. So fish, anything larger, usually smash, you can do twice a week. Anything larger will be bigger, and they eat more fish, and they're around more, so then they are in the ocean more, so then they're exposed to more mercury. So people of childbearing age really should only eat it maybe like not really at all if you're trying to have children, or if you are a child. And people that are past that prime, then they can do it once a month, which I'm talking about like tuna or something, right? Another type of a source of omega-3s are flax seeds, flax oil, chia seeds, hemp seeds. So chia pudding is actually really, really tasty if you ever soak chia and make it into just kind of like a pudding or something like that. So these are all plant-based, and you got to remember the conversion of that omega-3 all the way down to the EPA and DHA. Remember that pathway that I showed you? All the way down to EPA and DHA. It's about like less than 5 to 10% of EPA and 2 to 5 of DHA. What that means is when you eat a plant-based, this is plant-based omega-3 versus animal-based, okay? This is converted, you need to eat a lot more of it for it to be converted all the way down that pathway. So usually people eat this and they'll like sprinkle it on their oatmeal. It's like you need a whole heap, tablespoons of it in your food. That's why I like that chia pudding actually, because you get like a whole serving of it. So you got to eat more. Plant-based, you have to eat more of, because it just doesn't convert as much. Or, if you're a strict plant-based eater, then you have to supplement. Okay, I'll talk about that next. So other sources of plant-based are avocados, great amount of omega-3 fatty acids, walnuts, nut butters. I like that particular brand of Artisana. It's just nothing but that nut butter, so it's really easy on the go. And brassica, believe it or not, actually has omega-3s. You have to eat, in good amounts. Edamame, which is soy. And some people can't eat soy. Some men don't like to eat soy because of the estrogenic effects. Seaweed as well. And the supplementation is algae. So this is a plant-based supplementation. It's basically what the fish eat. When you're eating the fish, this is kind of the benefit where you are getting it from. So this is just straight up algae. So my vegan people, usually I recommend algae for them. And they absolutely need it. I always tell people in this talk, if you know of a vegan, make sure you do this and B12, because they're highly deficient usually. They don't eat enough of it. And then about butter, I didn't really do a good segue, but by the way, about fats and butter. Butter, it's really, the verdict is still out there about butter, if it's good or not. It is a saturated fat, but really, there's really nothing that terrible about it. If you get a good cultured butter, the butter always has natural flavors. I hate that. I absolutely hate that. I don't know what that means. I still, to this day, I have no idea what natural flavors means in butter. It should just be cream, cultured cream, or something to that effect. And ghee, which you'll see up there in a second when we eat. Ghee is essentially clarified butter. It comes from the East. It's a good way to preserve butter, because butter can go bad. So what we do is we heat it up and we take out all the protein and we throw it away and we just keep the fat. And that's what clarified butter is. So those, in moderation, they're really not that bad. If you go to the fake stuff, you'll end up craving more fat and you'll end up eating more of it, and it's really not that good for you. So that's, because people usually ask, is butter okay? It's fine. Just eat the real stuff. So our goal is to reduce the omega-6s, right? So that we decrease that pro-inflammatory pathway that I showed you first off. And really, the examples are corn oil, soy oil, sunflower oil, vegetable oil. They're a source. They're not bad, but you just don't want to do so much of it. It's just a ratio thing, right? If you're, like 6 days out of the week, you're eating olive oil and avocados, and that's kind of your source of fat. You do one day of this, it's really not going to make or break. But if you have a disease condition and you're trying to decrease all that inflammation, then it is a big deal, right? So there was, I don't know, y'all remember the trans fat, right? The trans fat stuff. When I gave this talk, it was, I think 2020 was when the FDA was supposed to 2018 rather, I'm sorry. 2018 was where they were supposed to take trans fat, and then they changed the wording to partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. They were supposed to take that away from processed food, and they should have now. I looked it up by the FDA, and it's banned now. But there may be still food out there on shelves that you don't know about, or something in your basement. Yeah, it's terrible for you. Throw it away. And then so omega-6 reduction in fat, and omega-9. So omega-9s are not essential for the body, because we can convert the 3s and 6s over, but it's kind of like completion of the different fatty acids, and the examples are olive oil and olives and raw nuts. So basically olive oil, for example, has both the 3s, a high ratio of 3s, a little bit of 6s, and a lot of 9s. So that's just kind of to complete out the fatty acids. So number 1 was fat. I'm kind of reminding everybody. Number 2 is eat lots of vegetables and fruit. So vegetables usually, like for example, in the keto world, it gets labeled as a carb, right? Some people are smiling like it's a carb. So then you can't eat it, or like Weight Watchers, you can't eat it. So you can't underestimate the richness of vegetables. So, and the definition of vegetables we'll go through, right? I'm not talking about a potato exclusively. That's not a vegetable exclusively. By definition, yes, but it's not exclusive. So don't underestimate the richness of the nutrients, the antioxidants, the vitamins, the minerals in vegetables and fruit. And the key is they're a lot more superior than one isolated nutrient. Case in point, everybody knows what this is, right? It's an orange, and everybody knows what vitamin is in an orange. Say it for me. C, right? Everyone knows, that's what this is. But did you know that a source of an orange, a citrus, has 60 other flavonoids, and this is what that little chart is, okay? They put it through like a mass spectrometer to look at like how many I don't even know if that's correct or not. Some organic chemistry person's be like, that's not what it is. They put it through a machine to look at how many compounds are in an orange or a citrus. And the list went on and on and on. But like 60 other flavonoids, 20 carotenoids, limonoids, like a whole host of other things, not just the vitamin C, okay? So this is a case in point where the natural form of something is more superior than the isolated ingredient that is touted, okay? And that's why you have to eat the whole food. That's the whole point of whole food. So other sources of vitamin C, there's all these other sources, not just an orange. There's a whole bunch of them. And guess what? Vitamin C, foods, vegetables that are in, that have associated with vitamin C, lower that C-reactive protein, that inflammatory marker that's found in our blood, and they actually have TPA. TPA is tissue plasminogen activator, and it's actually what is given as medication when somebody has a stroke in the emergency department. They give you TPA, push TPA, make sure that clot is busted. You can get this in food. You don't get the like clot busting amount, but you get it, and that's why that it's good for inflammation in the cardiovascular sense, okay? So what kind of vegetables, right? I said don't just eat a potato, eat the rainbow of vegetables. You have to eat the color, eat the rainbow of the veg. The deeper the color, the fresher, the more flavonoids you have. And the USDA shows an inverse relationship between high flavonoid intake and, again, lower CRP. So, you know, if you can make a meal like this, it actually heals you. Isn't that cool, right? That's really exciting. Let's see, other things, 5 or more servings a day, and it not only decreases the CRP, also adhesion factors, all involved in inflammation, it lowers heart disease, insulin resistance, and even cancers, okay? And that is truth. So eat more than your portion size if you can. I think that was in the, eat more, usually eat more than your portion size. You won't go wrong. You usually poop it out, unless there's really something wrong with you GI-wise. But it's more of a joke, because usually people don't eat enough vegetables. That's usually the thing. And fruit, let's not forget about the fruit. Another one that gets like cut out because it's a carb and it's bad for you, the carbs and all this other stuff. But again, it's nature's pharmacy. You can finish off a great meal with a little bit of seasonal fruit. Don't go overboard, just a little bit, like a little good serving for yourself. And the portion size, again, some people that have diabetes or something, they have to watch their sugars. They need to restrict a little bit because fructose is still sugar. But it is way better than sitting down with a bowl of ice cream, right? And it actually heals you. So that's the vegetables and fruit, okay? Next is grain, eating whole grain. So eating whole grain, this is always interesting because people, I always ask my patients, like, oh, if you have any food questions, just email me or text me or whatever. And they'll show me examples of food, and I'm like, go through the next one, I'll show you what I'm talking about. But so this lowly grain, it doesn't matter what kind of grain, usually like, let's say like wheat, right? If you look at this picture, you've got the one on the left, the whole grain, and it's a bran. They've got the outer filling, it's full of B vitamins and minerals. And then in the inside, there's the rich starchy part is the carbohydrate portion of it, which has other vitamins in there. There's like a little bit of protein and vitamin B, usually B vitamins in the endosperm. And then the germ and the usually has vitamin B, vitamin E, minerals, and other phytochemicals. So what do we do with the grain? We usually take it all out, hull it, and we get the endosperm, and that's what's refined, right? That's what usually is refined, like for example, flour. And then what they do is they take out all these great minerals and vitamins on the grain, and then they'll what's called fortify it, quote unquote, fortify it. So the fortification is they put in back the folate and the B vitamins and all this other stuff. It's a pointless endeavor, I think, because if you just eat the whole grain, usually what happens is, people will say like, oh my gosh, I can't eat this particular wheat or whatever. Some majority of people have an easy issue if you just do less of the processed. They usually don't have as much stomach pain with it because of that fortification. There's other people that have to not even touch the grain. That's a whole other issue. But okay, let's have a talk real quick. These are whole grains, okay? This is not whole grain. Uncle Ben's Ready Rice whole grain. Nothing against these brands. They're very popular. They're not, they tout whole grain. They're not whole grain. Why? They use the whole grain and then they grind it up and then they process it and it's not whole grain anymore. So it's processed whole grain. So you're thinking you're eating this really healthy cereal. It's not. It's terrible for you. Why? It's because of the glycemic load. So when you can actually chew it with your teeth and it takes you a while to chew it down, it's actually better for you because how quickly you chew it and how easily, think about Cheerios, how easily, you can pretty much not even chew it, you just swallow it and you'll digest it in your stomach. So how quickly you get it into your stomach is how quickly it goes into your bloodstream, and that's called a glycemic load, and the higher the glycemic load, the more bran is removed from it. So with one meal, you can have an increase speed of absorption, an increased release, immediate release from a processed carbohydrate, increase in CRP and cytokines immediately from one meal. And that's why, when you eat something like that, you just don't feel good. And some people, honestly, they don't even know that they don't feel good. They always feel like that. So that's what I'm trying to educate about. So there's like a 200 to 300 times loss of phytochemicals by removing the germ and increasing the glycemic load. And so those examples of whole grain are not whole grain. Okay? So what is whole grain? This is whole grain. These are whole seeds, whole grains, like brown rice or buckwheat. Regular rice is in there too, by the way, so I'm not hating on regular rice. Quinoa, amaranth. I always forget this one, so I had to put it in there. Millet. And then there's these examples. I have some examples in here. Some are gluten-free, pasta noodles. And the next one shows you kind of a spectrum. Basmati rice, steel cut-oats. These are whole things that you have to actually put in your kitchen and actually cook yourself. And you have to grind it with your teeth and you have to swallow it. That's what I'm talking about. This particular bread is actually not really that bad. It's actually pretty good. It's sprouted. Okay, somebody's got a thumbs up on that one. Woo! And barley is another one that you can eat whole grain as well. And here's the spectrum, the continuum of carbohydrate choice. We talked about fruits and veggies, unprocessed grains, and lightly processed. And really kind of like if you can draw a line-ish over here and try not to do as much of this stuff on the rare end and do more of this stuff on the more frequent end. So that's kind of the deal with whole grains. People get in trouble with whole grains because they're tasty and it goes, even if it is whole grain, sometimes people have to portion themselves right. So we get in trouble with that. So portion size is usually the issue. We usually eat too much of it. So even in large amounts, whole grains can get into your bloodstream and increase your blood sugar. So that's just kind of how your body deals with carbohydrates in general. And that's obesity, and that can lead to inflammation, so we don't want that. So we usually want to portion the whole grains just right, and then we also want to make sure that the ingredients are right as well. And make sure you don't have any additives. Gluten-free is great, but you got to look at the ingredients. You have to read all the ingredients because they're still going to process. It's still processed. You have to come to that conclusion that it's still processed, and if you have to eat gluten-free, then you want to do it on that spectrum of on the rare end, like over here, and want to push more to the whole stuff. Okay. So we did fat, we did veg, we did grain. The next one is protein. Protein, mostly plants than animals. Animal protein's good, but if we can try to do more plant protein. And there's many studies that have been supporting data that there's been health benefits of plant-based protein and healthy alternatives. So it doesn't have to be exclusive, but if you can add more of it and decrease your animal protein size, it's all about a ratio. So here are all the examples of legumes. We're going to be eating one of the legumes in a little bit. And legumes have high protein, high fiber, iron, folic acid, and Bs. And let's see, what do I have over here? The processed meats. So there's kind of a debate with this one. It's really not really clear about the processed meats because processed meats, in not the hot dog thing sense of like a raw, a dead processed meat that you're kind of thinking of. The old traditional cured meats are actually fermented. And traditionally, old cured meats in Western Europe and in those areas were eaten with other things. They weren't exclusively eaten by themselves. They were eaten with some kind of fermented food or something. So, there is an association with cardiovascular disease and cancer with processed meats, but is it that we forgot to eat the fermented food, meats, or that we forgot to eat the other parts like sauerkraut or mustard with them? It could be that. So, historical meat preservation was a necessary requirement for humans. So I kind of like, maybe they didn't have as much of it, is the other thought too. So look for things like organic and grass-fed when you're looking at meats itself as a benefit. And remember, this is that kind of remember if you have oh, I'm sorry. Let me. I was going to go to the B12 thing. I'll have another slide for that one. So another source of animal protein. We talked about fish ad nauseum with the fat stuff, and then there's dairy, cheese. So this is real cheese, right? Cheese that when you put it somewhere, it grows like a nice little velvet of fungus. So I'm telling you the truth. So people eat cheese and they think 2 things of plastic wrapped all over the cheese is real cheese. It's not real cheese, it's fake cheese. It's processed cheese. So you actually want, if you're going to eat cheese, eat the real stuff that's fermented that actually will get a little bit of mold. It's okay, don't freak out. You just chop a little bit off the mold, shave it off, throw it away. Because the whole thing is moldy, okay? Let me just break it down for you. It's made out of mold. So if it gets a little moldy on the look, just cut the corner off, throw it away, and then just forget about it and say goodbye, friend, and then you keep slicing it and eating it. That is real cheese. People really don't know what real cheese is. They've really stepped away from real cheese, and it's really processed. People usually eat very processed cheese. So I just kind of wanted to go with that. And the vegan part of it is that it's really not a sustainable lifestyle. I'll tell every vegan in the face that veganism is not sustainable because they will die or have a neurological issue if they don't have animal products, or they'll have to supplement. So they have to supplement with, we talked about the algae, omega fatty acids, and B12 is the only nutrient that's found in animal products. So it's not sustainable and you have to supplement. That's kind of tell every vegan out there, because they really don't know, especially the young people that have made it really, really trendy. They have no idea. I had one girl that was getting numbness and tingling in both of her fingers and toes, and I was like, you have polyneuropathy because you're vegan. You got it. Yeah, I mean, you can reverse it, but at some point it will be irreversible. So that's protein, okay? And then the last one, and then we'll take a little break, is spice. People really forget this one, and I harp on everybody about spice. Spice it up. Anti-inflammatory spices like turmeric, ginger, rosemary, oregano, even cayenne have studied to be decreased in inflammation. And spices have been around a lot longer than randomized controlled trials. So that's our nature's, our pharmacy, right? We've been using spices and medicinals for thousands of years. So you have to put this in food, and this is one thing that people just don't do enough of. So, one example is turmeric, and we will be doing this, we'll be eating turmeric shortly. People think, you know, taking a supplement of turmeric or the curcumin, which is the active ingredient, is enough. It's not enough. Turmeric has so many other components of it than its curcumin component that is of a benefit. Curcumin actually in a study has been shown to have equivalent pain relief to ibuprofen and diclofenac for osteoarthritis of the knee. And turmeric has been used in Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine from where I'm from, in Nepal and India, for thousands of years. You have to cook turmeric in fat in order to release the curcumin to be of any benefit. Excuse me. If you were to just have a liquid form of turmeric in water, it goes into your kidneys, and it's really good for your kidneys and bladder, but it doesn't have the same anti-inflammatory benefits. And this is a qualitarian alert. A lot of spices people have on their countertops. If you flip it over, it'll have, excuse me, I'm thinking I'm gonna have to have a water break. It'll have a whole bunch of different ingredients like maltodextrin and all this other stuff, the spices. So this is an example of, you know, simply, I have no financial relationship to this, but it's just a really good one. And it actually has all of the listed here. For ginger, I think it's got oregano. I don't think it has cayenne. It's got turmeric in it. It's a pretty easy one, the adobo spice mix, to kind of put in your food, and it has turmeric in there. And this would be a great segue to try some turmeric. So we've got two things paired together, an east meets west today. It's khichdi, which is an super infused turmeric anti-inflammatory rice and lentil. It's mung lentils. Very easy for digestion. It's got some ghee in it. It's got cumin in it that is an anti-inflammatory. It's got a hing, or what's called esophytida, which actually decreases gas and decreases blood pressure. And we've got that mix, so that's kind of a salty, kind of like a stewy, porridgey, I don't know how to describe it, with microgreen salad. And the microgreen salad, we actually, you know, portions of the microgreen salad we actually grew here, and we can look at that too. So we'll just take a break here, and we'll go eat, and then we'll bring our food back, and then we'll continue. Awesome.
All the plates are back here. Everybody want to help themselves? And there you can take whatever kind you want, a bowl or a small one or a big one.
Laura
And add the
Yes, Laura Thomas.
That's where he's.
Okay, cool. Well, great. So you see the therapist next door to Laura Thomas. So then you found
Yes,
out.
but I see him via computer.
Okay, got it. He texted it to you.
And texted it and said, it's on this
Okay, got it.
poster. I apologize. She printed something. I didn't have anything about registration. I absolutely would have. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, yeah, it's fine. I chili powder maybe, but
Where?
like mid-meal as well. But it's up your palate, clean actual detoxify. Let's see, like fire, right? So if you want to yeah.
You look at these meal prep things, and it's like 25 things. It's ridiculous.
So if anybody wants to get seconds, don't be shy. There's plenty. I'm serious. Let me look really quick. She's there. We had a good turnout, though. I'm excited. But I encourage the whole pot of this. Fire. We rice, lentil stuff. Kind of talking. Like, let me just tell you what you're eating. You're actually eating something. The Yeah.
You look at these meal prep things, and it's like 25 things. It's ridiculous.
So if anybody wants to get seconds, don't be shy. There's plenty. I'm serious. Let me look really quick. She's there. We had a good turnout, though. I'm excited. Oh, man. So there's more salad we can make, and then there's a whole pot of this. I'm going to eat afterwards. For sure.
I think it's like the analysis paralysis.
So let me, while we're kind of talking, let me just tell you what you're eating. You're actually eating something, the kind of the stewy rice lentil stuff is really easy to digest. It's a great detoxifier, right? So if you're wanting to do a cleanse, it's a great introduction to cleaning up your palate, cleaning up your, food. It's optional with the cilantro, but I encourage cilantro because cilantro actually takes out heavy metals. It's an actual detoxifier. So you don't like it, just throw a little bit in there. Maybe just eat a little bit, like a pinch. And other things that it's got in there, a lot of turmeric. It's nice and yellow, and it's paired with. Traditionally in our culture, it's usually paired with just like cut. Let's see, like cucumber and carrots or something like that. But I wanted to make like a Western kind of twist to it to add that salad because everybody eats salad so much. But it's always the dressing. I have issues with the dressing. The dressing is the unhealthiest part of all these. You get these beautiful organic greens and then you slather all this horrible dressing over it. It just ruins it. It just kind of defeats the purpose. So I wanted to have like a base for somebody to kind of say, oh, this is a way in which you can have a relatively healthy probiotic dressing, because that's balsamic vinegar. It has bacteria in there. And then that can help you to digest on top of it. So, and we'll be talking about pro and prebiotic and symbiotic. So that's kind of what this is. It's kind of a symbiotic food.
Is red wine vinegar in the...
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, absolutely. Look at the ingredients. There's that sheet that I have in there about like ingredient watching, because they'll put a bunch of crap in there. That's the issue. Right. But like the extra additive stuff, they'll have like different additives in there that it's just kind of ugh. Let me take one more swig here. Great question. So somebody asked about ingredients for the khichdi mix. I actually have what we did was we made it from scratch, but I actually have like a cheater version, and I have these spice mixes over there on that other table, and I also have all the ingredients that were put in, so you can actually touch the seeds and take a picture of it, the ghee or the clarified butter, and all those things. I'll mention again one more time at the end, okay? Yeah, good question. Okay, I think this is a good time, and if anybody just wants to eat more, by all means, we are not a shy group whatsoever, okay? So the whole point of this is to get your fill, and that's pretty much all we're going to eat today, because it should be very, very filling. And you will note that you will have kind of a sense of well-being, and we'll talk about that, a mental well-being afterwards as well. So if we go on down the list, remember, we're at number 6. And this isn't necessarily food, but it's about eating, okay, and having a mindful mouth. And mindfulness, people make it really, really complicated. What does that mean? Am I supposed to breathe? What are we doing? Am I doing yoga while I'm eating? No, it just means that we're just being aware of your plate. Look at your food, put your phone down. Have a meal like this. Share it with others. Have something that you want to discuss. Have a meaningful relationship with the food that is in front of you, rather than in a hurried, rushed, in the car. I see so many people eating in their car, or they'll have a screen open, or their phone, or they're getting alerts. What do we end up doing? We end up eating more. We end up having, tummy aches. We end up feeling terrible, having a headache, just even from crouching down and looking at your phone and eating. So that's what really mindfulness means. Putting the phone down, turning the TV off, looking at your food, regardless of the quality of it. If you eat too much of it, it's still bad for you, even if it's good for you, right? It's not good. The excess calories, again, lead to inflammation because of obesity. So the other thing is chew slowly. And I should put this one in here, and I'll actually make a note about water. people don't drink water correctly when they're eating. You really should drink a lot of water before a meal. That helps to prime the stomach acids. And then you really shouldn't drink water while you eat. That makes you full, and it actually dilutes your stomach acids more. So then, you know, it takes that ratio off. So your body knows how to digest. We are already a machine that's made pretty well. We just need to support it. And so I need to put that in there. So pre-water, and then eat, and then 30 minutes, it takes about 30 to 45 minutes for digestion, and then you can drink your water again to help to aid. Savor your food and enjoy it with loved ones, and that mind-body-food connection really helps to enhance the meal. So that's what mindful mouth means. And we'll be talking about mindfulness again, but in a different sense. So this is more about at the meal. Number 7 is an Okinawa saying. It's a philosophy, and how you say it is hara hachi bu, and which that means in Okinawan Japanese is that you eat until you're 8 parts full, or 8 out of the 10 parts full. So when you look at your meal, and this is really like for people that have issues with portion control, or issues with, you know, if they feel like they are on the higher end of the weight spectrum. If you can follow this particular philosophy, you can kind of gauge and let your stomach, well, your stomach will lie to you, really. That's the issue. You won't feel full until really like 30 minutes after your meal. So if you can kind of plan for that and eat 8 out of 10 parts, then you're kind of trying to aid your stomach in portion control. So that's kind of a summary of this Okinawan philosophy, which I really like. And if you don't know about the Okinawans, they are they're like a specific little island off of Japan that I think, like, I want to say the highest number of centenarians in the world. They live forever, and they not just follow this particular philosophy, but they do all these other things. They have community, they garden, they sit out in the sun, they cook their own food, and they have a good connection with their community. I said that. So there's like great, you know, documentaries about the Okinawans and how they kind of lived for a really long time, and very healthily, actually. And there's a lot less cardiovascular disease compared to the rest of mainland Japan. So that is number 7. That's easy enough. Oh yeah, I put that in there. And then number 8. So eat fermented food. And why? So let's ask first of all, what is the microbiome? So that is in your gut. There are more cells in your gut than there are in your own body. There's more bacteria in there housed. Right now, 100 trillion living in there with you. And 70% of that, they live in your colon. And what your DNA combined with that bacterial DNA is what's called metagenomics. They actually can regulate you. You think you're regulating them. It's the other way around. They actually help with intestinal barrier function. So between, if you look at this is a blood vessel. Between the bacteria that could course through your blood, right, and your intestinal tract, there's like one line of cells. It's literally like a line of cells. So if you have normal tight junctions, here is food. Food is, oh, I should have done that. Food is over here on the side of these little finger-like projections. Food is on this side. It's going through your intestinal mucosa. And if you have good tight junctions, they don't go to your bloodstream. They don't become pathogenic. If you have inflamed, that endothelial layer is inflamed, then anything that you eat can actually transmigrate over into your bloodstream, and then you get a whole bunch of issues. And everyone's kind of heard of this term of like leaky gut, right? That's what that means. Okay, so if you don't have these nice tight junctions, then potential pathogens can go through. Then you start looking at food allergens that can go through. Then your body starts making antibodies to those, and then we get what's called food sensitivity. So they're not it can be full-on food allergies, like an anaphylaxis type situation, but it can also be food sensitivities. So the gut microbiome is in charge of that, okay? It also is in what you eat, but the epithelial, the microbiota actually line to help regulate that part of the wall. There's immune regulation. So when we think of bacteria in our gut, we think, oh my gosh, pathogen, antibiotic, kill it. It's a balance. There's pathogenic bacteria in there, but there's also beneficial bacteria in there, and it's really that ratio that you want to tip just right. So some bacteria are pro-inflammatory, some are anti-inflammatory, and you can change your microbiome with your food to get you there. And the microbiome also changes things like bone remodeling. There's been studies that even with osteoporosis, your microbiome, so they looked at microbiomes of healthy women, postmenopausal, that have bone strength that are more improved than others that have a different set of microbiomes. So it can even modulate. Your bacteria and your microbiota can be modulated to prevent you from having osteoporosis. And it also, we know about the colon cancer now because they talk about it so much, but I feel like the osteoporosis thing is an interesting one. The next one, we talked about leaky gut, intestinal permeability. The next one the microbiome does is brain and behavior. So the enteric nervous system is that second brain. It's, that when you get that gut feeling, it's really it's the nervous system in your gut. That's where it's coming from. So there's more neurons in our gut than there are in our brain. So sometimes that gut feeling is a true thing. It's coming from a real place. And there's bacteria, beneficial bacteria in fermented food that help to aid in digestion constantly. And the best thing is to get a daily dose in every meal. You want it to be in every meal, okay? You want to have a fermented food in every meal so that you can keep the gut flora happy, help aid in digestion, and make you happy. And by the way, the microbes that are in there, they actually help by creating things like norepinephrine and GABA and serotonin. So these are neurotransmitters. And these neurotransmitters are actually released by your gut bacteria. And they are then taken up into our brain, and they can modulate anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, all these different things. So it's not just the inflammation aspect of it. So what are some examples of real fermented food, right? So this is kefir. If you can have dairy, kefir is like a yogurt drink. This is just straight up yogurt, which you can make at home very easily. This is pink sauerkraut from the purple cabbages. And then kombucha. Kombucha's kind of taken a turn lately. It's all over the place, but this is like real kombucha made from the mother. It's usually what it looks like. It looks pretty raunchy in there sometimes, but you end up straining it and then drinking it.
What is that?
Kombucha is a fermented drink. It's a fermented tea drink. You can put tea, caffeinated tea or non-caffeinated tea, and it has almost kind of like a starter, like sourdough, if you want to think of it like that, in the drink itself, and then you can kind of keep it replenished. And this is fermented wine, unfiltered. That's why it looks so cloudy. This is white wine, like mead, old school mead that everybody would drink in the dark ages where they didn't have clean water. And unfiltered beer. So those are all examples of fermented, even beer and wine. So those are all examples, as long as you don't kill any of those things. So, and all of those things have polyphenols in them. Specifically, beer and wine have polyphenols that are antioxidants. And again, there's moderate amounts, 1 drink for a woman, 2 drinks for a man, usually kind of what the rule is. And you really have to ingredient watch with specifically alcohol. And I mean, I think, isn't it the alcohol, like ATF, the buyer, or who is it in charge of alcohol, right? It's really not the FDA that's involved. Or so the ingredients in alcohol, you can't actually, they're proprietary. You can't ever like really look them up unless now you go to their website. So if you were to look up any beer, for example, or any wine, you really wouldn't know what's in it. So just kind of like that qualitarian in me that likes to tell people, make sure you look that up. You can make it yourself, fermented food, you can make it yourself. I love this book. This is an update of Sandra Katz's Wild Fermentation. Lots of different recipes in this book. Highly recommend. You can have your own culture kits and friends on your countertop, and you can add to them daily. So how often do you need to eat a fermented food? Ideally at each serving. If your digestion is a little fast, maybe you need to lessen it. If your digestion is a little slow, maybe increase it. So supplementation, if you really can't get it, let's say you're traveling, I would generally recommend probiotics that are in the billions or billion CFUs, colony forming units, and refrigerated on the counter. It doesn't really matter. Get something on sale. Usually look for the billions because by the time it goes through your stomach, only so much of it lives. Pre, pro, and symbiotic foods, okay? So we kind of had like a symbiotic food that we were eating. So what does this mean? Probiotics are the fermented, that's the bacteria itself that you're eating, and I gave you all these different examples. The prebiotics are what the bacteria eat. So they eat these foods. If you eat bacteria, they need to eat something too. So if you have a prebiotic food with it, then they are happy. And those two things put together make a symbiotic food. And what we usually eat, I should have put spaces in there, it looks kind of crazy, is dal bhat tarkari achar, and that is a symbiotic food. And I'll show you in the next one, and I've got some examples of different symbiotic foods that you can kind of try. This is what we traditionally eat, and that leads to number 9, eat traditional if you want or if you can. This particular thali dish, or it's a plating, has all the veg. If you look at it, again, it's a pattern of eating, right? Anti-inflammatory lifestyle is a pattern. So this fits that pattern of high veg, low meat. I think this is the meat portion is very low. You've got a grain in there that's whole. You've got a plant-based protein, which is the lentils. So dal, bhat, tarkari, which means dal is lentils, bhat is rice, tarkari is vegetables, and achar is the fermented portion of it. So we cook this twice a day. We're always in the kitchen cooking it, and it's exhausting. But this in our country, this is what we eat. Okay. And this is a type of traditional food. Everyone has a different traditional heritage, and they usually kind of match in that pattern. They usually do. And you just got to find it. If you don't have one and you want to pick one, pick one. It doesn't matter. If you look at these kind of traditional recipes, they fit with the anti-inflammatory lifestyle really, really well. And lastly, except for the bonus round, it's not just food. There's other components. Walking or activity, you want to do at least like 30 minutes 5 times a day. If you don't like to walk, go chop wood. If you don't like to do that, go garden, or put a Fitbit on and go clean your house and see how many steps you do, because that's activity as well. So sometimes quantifying is more powerful than having to like put on yoga pants and sign up for something, right? Exercising, so stress reduction. We talked about mindful mouth just for the meal itself, but this is more stress reduction in a global sense of meditation and prayer, journal, whatever you do, whatever it is you need to do to help you to reduce the stress, whether it's having a bathing ritual or journaling at the end of the day. I tell, my construction worker guys, hey, sit in your truck and just sit there and just breathe for a minute after your shift. That's what that is, mindfulness, right? So everyone can do it, and it decreases stress, decreasing stress decreases inflammation. Sleep. So it's not sleep well. So you can sleep, but you also have to sleep really well to get that good quality. And I'd really like to turn everybody on to 2 sleeps. There's this BBC article about having 2 sleeps, the lost medieval habit of biphasic sleep. It will change your world view about what it means to have restful sleep. Cut to the chase, people slept twice at night. They would wake up in the middle of the night, they'd do some work, and then they'd go back to sleep, and that was A-okay. It's not okay now because everyone has a 9 to 5, and they have to be, you know, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and everyone gets bent out of shape, and then they feel very stressed and anxious about the whole ordeal. But, you know, not everybody has to fit that 8-hour schedule. And turning off lights at sunset, these lights stimulate your brain into decreasing amounts of melatonin, so you have to detoxify from these types of lights. Getting blue light blockers for screen time, things like that, that can really help. We usually try to turn off all of our lights at sunset and just kind of unwind that way. And burning a candle, that luminescence of a candle actually can help your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is a specific portion of the brain, to help release melatonin, to help you to feel really, really sleepy. And caffeine, reducing caffeine. Caffeine is a mind-altering substance. It's a stimulant that's abused in the Western world heavily, especially in the US. And I usually try to tell people to abstain as much as you can past noon. Some people get really bent out of shape about it. They really can't. They're like, why? But so coffee is an antioxidant in limited amounts. 1 to 2 cups is kind of like the max. Coffee is an antioxidant, but it's the caffeine that gets people in trouble. So try to brew, you know, tea and have control of how much you brew. Don't let it just sit there. Try to control like a 1 to 2 minute brew if you can, if you're doing something midday. And cacao is a great substitute, which leads me to the bonus part of number 11 is to treat yourself to chocolate. So cacao has high amounts of flavonoids and fiber, reduces serum inflammatory markers, improves lipids, enhances the blood vessel lining of your vasculature, reduces insulin, the reduction in insulin resistance, and a reduction in diabetes. And one study showed an inverse correlation between chocolate consumption and cardiovascular and all-cause mortality even. So what is cacao? This is cacao. This is like the fruit, the cacao fruit, and you can actually open the pod up, and we tasted it. And when we were in the Dominican Republic, we opened it and ate it. It's like this like pulpy, white, sweet, you know, fruit, and then you let that dry off, and then that gets roasted, and then it gets pulverized, and that gets made into chocolate eventually. So this is a Hershey Kiss. No offense against Hershey Kisses, but it has approximately 37% cacao, so that means 70% of it is sugar that you're eating. The recommended real chocolate is about at least 70% cacao. So chocolate is good, but we don't want to turn into that, right? Like that, not that much chocolate. So some brands that I really like, Navitas is a brand that we usually like. I think it's only cacao. The only ingredient in there is cacao. And then we like to do local, so Eskinosi is a really great one. This one is, I think, 77, if I'm not mistaken, or 78, something very high. So they recommend 1 to 2 ounces. How much is that? About that much. So you get about 5. That's pretty fair, like 5 in a day or something. That's a pretty fair amount, and it's not that much sugar. And Eskinosi actually has 100% cacao, which you really have to acquire. You have to acquire that taste. You have to put it in your mouth and really change your thoughts. So some bonus rounds I'm going to do really quick because it's anti-inflammatory lifestyle. So we went down the rundown of 1 through 11. Some bonus stuff, which I think should go into other talks. Clean water, clean products, personal care items are very toxic for you. EWG is a great brand. Clean containers, I've got an example back there of a glass container. You're making all this delicious food, don't put it in plastic, please, it's terrible for you. Clean cookware, don't cook in nonstick. Yeah, somebody went, oh yeah. Because what are you scraping off your pan? You have no idea what's in there, and you don't want to know, just get rid of it, just don't use it. Stainless steel, is superior. It's nice and clean. You can eventually make it nonstick if you cook enough, and you can season them. And then some clean greens. So we've got Otto's really cool organic super grow system in the back that we actually grew microgreens on for this talk, and we timed it to put it in the salad. So, source, the source, it's organic. So those are some kind of points to think about for bonus rounds. So if you want to take anything, this is one thing was the qualitarian part, right? Look at the ingredients. The second part of it is number two, just the number two. Two of those components of this list that we went down, right? Like the 1 through 10, not even the bonus part, just the 1 through 10. If you can take two of that, of the anti-inflammatory lifestyle, and adhere it into your life, that can significantly reduce your rate of cardiovascular disease and mortality. Just two components of this talk, just two things. If you can just do two things out of here, you can change your health around. Okay? And that is all. And I will end this, and then we can have. I can pull it back up if you have specific questions on anything. But any questions? Feel free. Yeah, go ahead.
So raw nuts. I have read that there's one that's not good with inflammation. And I think it was almonds, is that right?
So the question is raw nuts. Is it good for inflammation? Is it not? There's some debate about raw nuts. It's kind of like a nuanced answer. It's not necessarily one is bad and one is this and that. You have to, traditionally what was done was nuts are very hard to grow, so we didn't have that many nuts, so we didn't eat that much of them. They were really hard to find, so the processing portion of it has gotten a lot easier. And I think people have gotten to this raw food craze that sometimes gets them in trouble. I think it depends on if you have a sensitivity or an allergy to the nut and the source of it. Sometimes the source of it, if you have, let's say, a high mold levels in your body, then that may be not necessarily the best for you. So those types of nuance. So it's not like a general, all of this nut is bad. Per person. It has to be, it has to be individualized, and you have to really get good measures of like food sensitivity testing or organic acid testing to see if you have mold toxicities in you to see. But that's kind of getting like really deep into like personalized medicine, right? So yeah, that's kind of how I would answer that. It's not necessarily bad. We just had roasted Valencia almonds. So they're blanched, and then they're put with a bunch of anti-inflammatory spices like sea salt and marjoram and basil. They're all roasted. I mean, it's delicious. So eating it that way was like amazing and anti-inflammatory. So eating a handful of that, is that wrong? I mean, if you have anaphylaxis, absolutely, that's not good for you. But, that's like an example. Yes, question?
With that CRP level,
Yes.
What would you consider like a warning level versus a healthy level? If you have
So if you, if it's, I think CRP strictly is like 10 or less or something, and even then you want it to be on the lower end of the less than 5s. HSCRP, you want it to be really under 2 or even, HSCRP. So little h, little s, high sensitivity CRP. And that you can compare. So that one is more cardiovascular. So it depends on what we're kind of looking at. Are we looking at your whole body? Do you have an and you don't need to tell me this, but I'm just saying, do you have an autoimmune condition? We just look at regular CRP versus do you have high cholesterol? Then we want to look at HSCRP to kind of see where you're at.
So for regular, you said 5?
Yeah, about 5 or so.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead. Oh, many questions.
I wrote a list.
Oh, wow, okay.
So, I've heard bad things about candles and what candles do in your house
Uh-huh.
as far as when they start burning.
That's
So
a great
when you
question.
say
Yeah.
burn a candle, is there a specific type and a limit of how long to burn it?
So that's a great question. The question was about candles. What is safe? What is healthy? What would be recommended for candles? We actually buy natural wax candles, natural beeswax candles, not soy, beeswax candles. They usually don't have any additives or dyes or anything in them. And they smell like honey, kind of honey. They smell really good. And we don't necessarily have a limit on how long. I guess you want to be careful about not burning your house down. There's that component, but exposure and things like that from a natural candle, I haven't, I can look it up, but yeah. But yeah, that's a really great question about what type of candle.
Because a lot of candles are scented.
Are scented, and they have this, yeah, ours is usually not scented, and it's usually just beeswax.
Okay.
That's it.
And
And
then, do you have like a book or two that you would suggest for like overall more information about this topic?
a book, I'll have to write that one down.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just saying it might be interesting, like if this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg
Right.
and you wanted to do more, what a suggestion would be of a good author?
Okay, I can get back to you on that
Okay.
one. I don't have anything that like was like, whoo, this is it, but I can definitely get back to you. And why don't you?
On your bucket list after school.
Yeah. Oh, like in 5 years. Wait, no. If you could, yeah, put it and say like your question was just the book to recommend, and I can try to look something up that's easy and yeah
And then did you
easy to read.
say for the balsamic glaze dressing, it was just balsamic vinegar?
Yes, so the question is the balsamic vinegar that we tried. The recipe is actually in the packet,
Oh, got it.
and the
Okay.
brand and everything, like
Okay.
how much and all that kind of stuff is all in there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And both the recipes, by the way, are all in there. Nice and I even put kind of extra wordy like why we're using it and what it's for and all that kind of extra stuff. And remember that there are ingredients, so you can even take pictures of what the ingredients were in the kitchen mix that we put. Like if you want to look at what these raw ingredients are, there's a little plate of display on that side of the table. There's a turmeric milk mix, which is a sweet, we didn't try this, but it's a sweeter version of an evening drink that you can have. And that mix is there, and then there's the kitchery mix, which is kind of like a cheater version of like the big pot thing that we made. And you can, if you wanted to purchase it, you can do that. And there's some other little displays over there too, if you wanted to look.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yes, question.
Another one. Going back to the slides when you were talking about, you showed Ben's original Ready Rice and wheat thins. You said those are not whole grain, but it says whole grain on the box. And then like the good stuff was, I noticed Pasta Barilla whole grain on there.
Right.
How do I tell the difference? Because I think of those as both like typical grocery store brands.
Right. So that spectrum, that next
Uh-huh.
one, the question was like, how do you know which one whole grain is good or which one's not? So how do you quantify how much of that? You want to look at the spectrum of how much of that you're eating. Like the pasta ones are a little bit more processed. The bread is a little bit more processed. So you'd put it on this spectrum of we want to eat less of it and you want to eat more of the things that are not as processed, not as whole grain.
So Barilla's definition of whole grain on their pasta and wheat thins whole grain is probably the same thing, just eat less of it?
Eat less of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's not like something specific I'm looking for on a label.
Right, but wheat things, I guarantee, like on the back, not
Like
to
all the
like
extra stuff?
all the extra
Yeah.
stuff, right? Like some of, and some of it, and that one I may have to pull from my thing, but some of them, like you'll have all this extra fortified stuff, even though it says whole grain pasta or whatever. Yeah, so you really have to dig and look at the ingredients. You really have to dig. Any other questions? Anybody from over here? No? You're welcome. Bye. Okay, great. Have fun. Well, thanks everybody for showing up and sitting and asking questions and being engaged. It was a really great talk. If you have any questions, you can email me. I have my card over there up in the front, and you can put your email there. And if you're shy, that's my personal notebook. If you're shy, you have a question you want to ask, and just put it, write it down, and give it to me or something. Thank you.